There is a fruit growing wild right now across 30 American states that, when fully ripe, measures higher on the sweetness scale than most candy bars. Not tropical, not cultivated, not irrigated or fertilized or sprayed. A wild tree growing in abandoned fields, along roadsides, and in forest edges, producing fruit so intensely sweet and complex that early European settlers described it as one of the greatest discoveries of the entire New World. The tree is the American persimmon. Scientific name, Diospyros virginiana. The name Diospyros comes from Greek. It means food of the gods, and the botanists who named it had tasted a fully ripe one. Because that name is completely accurate. It grows wild from Florida to Connecticut, from the Atlantic coast to Kansas and Nebraska. It produces abundant fruit every year for a century or more, with zero human input. No spraying, no watering, no fertilizing, no annual pruning. It simply grows and produces and grows and produces for 100 years. And almost no American plants it deliberately. That oversight is what this video corrects permanently. The problem with American persimmon is that most Americans who have encountered it tasted one at the wrong time. And tasting an unripe American persimmon is one of the most unpleasant fruit experiences in horticulture. Unripe American persimmon contains extraordinarily high levels of soluble tannins. These tannins bind instantly to proteins in the mouth, creating an intense puckering, astringent sensation that is genuinely shocking the first time it is experienced. The mouth goes dry. The tongue feels coated and contracted. Every person who has experienced it describes it the same way. The worst thing they have ever put in their mouth. And this reaction, this one bad experience with an unripe fruit, has given American persimmon its reputation. Generation after generation, someone tastes an unripe one, recoils in horror, tells everyone the tree produces inedible fruit, and the knowledge of how extraordinary a fully ripe one actually is never spreads. The reputation, built entirely on the wrong experience, travels farther than the truth. A fully ripe American persimmon, after frost has converted those tannins, is one of the sweetest, richest, most complex fruits grown on North American soil. The flesh becomes honey-like in consistency, deep orange-brown, with flavors of brown sugar, cinnamon, dates, and apricot, all simultaneously. There is a richness, a depth, that no other temperate fruit produces. People who taste a genuinely ripe one, for the first time, stop talking mid-sentence. The entire reputation problem comes from one chemical process that is completely reversible, and understanding that process is the key to understanding why American persimmon is one of the most undervalued food trees in the country. American persimmon has been part of the North American food landscape for thousands of years. Archaeological evidence shows its seeds and dried fruit being stored by indigenous communities across the eastern woodlands, dating back millennia. The Cherokee made persimmon bread, combining dried persimmon pulp with cornmeal into dense, sweet cakes that stored well through winter. The Iroquois dried persimmons on strings in the sun. The Algonquin word for the fruit, puchemon, eventually evolved into the English word persimmon, making it one of the native North American contributions to the English language. When European colonizers arrived, they quickly recognized the value of this tree. Captain John Smith, in his accounts of the Virginia colony in the early 1600s, wrote enthusiastically about persimmons. He documented precisely the transformation from astringent to sweet, and described the ripe fruit as one of the most pleasant discoveries of the new land. He understood, almost immediately, what took generations of later Americans to forget. George Washington planted American persimmons at Mount Vernon. Thomas Jefferson planted them at Monticello. Two of the most botanically curious and agriculturally serious minds in American history, both considered the American persimmon a tree worth cultivating. Jefferson, who maintained one of the most detailed garden records in American history, documented his persimmon trees with obvious appreciation. And then, across the following 2 centuries, as European food culture came to dominate American gardens, as Japanese persimmon appeared in grocery stores, as the native landscape became something to manicure rather than harvest, the American persimmon was quietly left behind. Not destroyed, not lost, simply overlooked, growing wild in fields and forests across 30 states, waiting for anyone who would stop and pay attention. Here is what makes American persimmon genuinely extraordinary as a food tree. A mature American persimmon tree, at full production, produces between 25 and 50 pounds of fruit annually. In an exceptional year, a single tree can approach 100 pounds. These are wild-type numbers. Improved named varieties, developed through serious horticultural breeding work, produce fruit dramatically larger than wild trees, with dramatically better flesh-to-seed ratios and dramatically better flavor consistency. Now here is the detail that stops people completely. American persimmon trees commonly live 100 years. Some documented specimens are over 200 years old, still producing fruit. The Diospyros genus, to which American persimmon belongs, produces some of the hardest, densest wood in North America. The same genus that produces ebony. These are not fragile, short-lived plants. They are some of the most structurally durable trees in the temperate world, and they produce fruit for the entirety of that extraordinary lifespan. Plant one today, and it will feed people who are not yet born. That is not a poetic exaggeration. That is the documented biology of this tree. And the cold hardiness is another area where American persimmon dramatically outperforms its better-known Japanese cousin. The Japanese Persimmon Diospyros kaki, the variety found in grocery stores, is cold hardy to zone 7 at best, and struggles in zone 8 without specific variety selection. The American persimmon is cold hardy to zone 4, and some varieties to zone 3. It belongs in the cold climates of the northern United States, in a way that Japanese persimmon simply never can. The science behind American persimmon covers both its extraordinary chemistry and its genuine nutritional value. The shift from astringent to sweet that happens after frost is a well-documented biochemical process. The soluble tannins responsible for the astringency polymerize and become insoluble as the fruit goes through freeze-thaw cycles. They do not disappear. They change their molecular structure, so they no longer bind to proteins in the mouth. The chemistry of the fruit transforms. The fruit does not become different. It becomes what it was always meant to be. This conversion does not require actual frost on the tree. It requires cold temperatures and time. Fruit picked unripe and left in a freezer for 2 days, then thawed, undergoes the same tannin conversion. This means American persimmon can be eaten reliably in climates that rarely frost, by simply harvesting and freezing briefly before eating. The science works, regardless of the weather. Nutritionally, American persimmon is exceptional. Studies from the University of Illinois have analyzed the phytochemical content, finding significant concentrations of carotenoids, particularly lycopene and beta-carotene, in the ripe fruit. The vitamin C content in ripe American persimmon has been measured at levels significantly higher than comparable quantities of orange in some analyses. It contains betulinic acid, a compound studied for its potential biological activity in laboratory research, and it provides natural sugars in a matrix of fiber, which moderates the sweetness delivery compared to processed sugar. The flavor depth of a fully ripe American persimmon translates into exceptional fermented products. Why, with this profile, does American persimmon remain outside mainstream American gardening? 3 honest factors explain it. The first is the tannin reputation already described. One bad experience with an unripe fruit creates a negative association that spreads easily. The fix is simply knowledge and timing. A ripe American persimmon after frost or freezing is a completely different food, but that knowledge has not traveled nearly as widely as it should. The second is the small fruit size of wild trees. Wild American persimmons are small, quite seedy, and produce relatively modest quantities of edible flesh. A gardener comparing wild American persimmon to commercially grown Japanese persimmon will understandably choose the Japanese variety on the basis of that comparison. But the comparison is flawed. The improved named varieties, Meter, Ennis, Early Golden, Molar, produce dramatically larger fruit, with much better flesh-to-seed ratios and flavor quality that the wild type only hints at. The third is patience. American persimmon trees from seed can take 8 to 10 years to produce fruit. Grafted named varieties produce in 3 to 4 years. But even 3 to 4 years feels long to a culture accustomed to annual vegetables and immediate results. The payoff, however, is a century of harvest. The patience required for the investment is extraordinarily small relative to the return. Growing American persimmon is genuinely one of the lowest maintenance fruit tree projects in all of horticulture. American persimmon is cold hardy to zone 4. It tolerates drought extremely well once established, due to a deep taproot that accesses subsoil moisture far below the surface. It tolerates poor soils, clay soils, and even wet soils that would kill apple or pear trees. It has no significant pest or disease problems. Late blight, fire blight, codling moth, all the threats that make conventional fruit tree management demanding, simply do not apply. The American persimmon is an extraordinarily self-sufficient tree once established. Most American persimmon trees are dioecious, meaning male and female flowers are on separate trees. For reliable fruit production, plant at least one male and one female tree in proximity. Some improved named varieties are self-fruitful, but planting 2 different varieties always improves yield and cross-pollinates reliably. The male trees produce no fruit, but their pollen is essential for the females to set a full crop. By grafted named varieties, not seedlings grown from seed. Meter is the most cold-hardy improved variety, documented reliable to zone 3. Early golden produces excellent large fruit with exceptional sweetness. Ennis and Moeller offer superb flavor with notably good flesh-to-seed ratios. These varieties are available from specialty nurseries including Burnt Ridge Nursery, Raintree Nursery, Edible Landscaping, and various online native plant specialists. After planting, water consistently for the first season while the deep taproot establishes. After year 2, the tree becomes almost entirely self-sufficient. No annual fertilizing required. No regular pruning required. Simply harvest fruit after the first frost of autumn, and every year thereafter, for the next century. Ripe persimmons freeze beautifully. Wash, remove the calyx, freeze whole on a tray, then transfer to bags. Frozen persimmon pulp is extraordinary in smoothies, baked goods, quick breads, and ice cream. Persimmon pudding, a traditional Appalachian preparation, is one of the great forgotten American desserts. Dense, moist, sweet, with a flavor that tastes like the very best version of autumn. American persimmon, sweeter than sugar when fully ripe. More vitamin C than oranges. Cold hardy to zone 4. 0 pest pressure. 0 significant disease problems. Lives 100 years or more. Native to North America. Growing wild across 30 states. And almost completely absent from American backyards. Drop sweet in the comments if the flavor description is what convinced you to look for this tree. And if a wild persimmon tree grows anywhere near where you live, tell us exactly where in the comments. Let's map the wild American persimmon network across the country. Subscribe to Famine Plant Secrets for one extraordinary forgotten plant every single week.